NRDC। आप सभी आमंत्रित हैं मंच पर तीसरे टेक्निकल सेशन के लिए। स्वागत है आपका।
Very good afternoon to all of you. As the people are trickling in, after the lunch, we will begin the session. It is a session that focuses on slow onset disasters. And also the slow onset disasters are very much linked to the impacts of climate change. So we will be discussing some of the implications of these slow onset disasters, but we also need to understand better that the slow onset disasters as they are understood are also changing in the both the time dimension. Earlier it would take a lot of time, droughts would be slow onset disaster and floods would be rapid onset disaster. Now the drought sets in very fast. So can we say that drought is a slow onset disaster? And when the floods come here, then the floods go away, but the water remains. We have a long spell of water logging. So these kind of definitions are changing thanks to the way the climate change makes it impact. But one thing is sure, that we have a new generation of hazards and they are making the impact. They are making the impact in diverse ways and in the ways that we have not always understood or we have not always assessed and calculated. So first we need to recognize these disasters, and second we need to find out ways of assessing them and then of course responding to them and mitigating them. Just to give you the example of heat wave, how the heat wave is gaining in impact over the years. Earlier the heat wave would have a spell of 3 days, 4 days. Now we have prolonged heat wave, 30 days, 40 days. And the heat wave is impacting all of us in varying degrees. And it has become a major concern for all of us. It's affecting so many sectors. The household sector, the small businesses, and even the large businesses. We have coastal and river erosion. Again, this process has set in. It happens over a very long period of time, but it is there, it's unmistakable, and people are getting displaced. People are, losing their land and houses, and it actually has a long-term impact on the settlements, livelihoods, and overall well-being of the people. When we have similar kinds of disasters, how should we assess the risks? How should we deal with them? At the local level, the most of the responses need to be organized at the local level. And how do we find some resources at different levels so that we can deal with some of these impacts in a more comprehensive manner? So these are some of the issues that we will discuss, and we have a great panel today. All of them are working in this area very actively. Abhiyan Tiwari ji, I have been working with him on heat wave management. Mr. Bajaj, again, we have been working with him in the context of loss and damage, and Ramraji, infrastructure resilience, Annie, we have been working with you for a long, long time. So, well, I have the advantage of working with all of you. Krishnan, yes, and I am TM director. So it's a great panel, and thank you very much to all of you for being here. So thank you, and I would like you to say something. Then I will hand it over to Mr. Krishnan, who will speak a little more about the slow onset disasters, how the climate change is making the impact, how our variability is increasing, and how it is bringing new set of challenges. So thank you.
Thank you, Krishna ji, for this great introduction. You've covered pretty much everything, but if you're talking of slow onset, especially from weather events, we would consider one, droughts, the second one being heat waves, but also increasingly there is an implication on the coastal, that is the sea level rise, because of the warming and melting. So awareness on these issues is paramount, and awareness needs to be there at all levels, at the local level, at the national level, at the subnational levels. But more importantly is, what do we do with the awareness? How do we ensure that most of these problems are also creating impacts at a local level? So how do we ensure that these local level impacts are not just anticipated, but also managed and addressed through solutions that work across different levels, across different contexts, and across different communities, and where the whole of society approach is essential. That was presented, a whole of society, whole of government approach is essential. But then finally, our aim should also be that awareness alone is not adequate. Awareness coupled with empowerment and the ability to act proactively, not react. I think that is where we are headed, and I don't think, as Krishnaji mentioned, we could have asked for a better panel. Someone who can talk about what is happening in terms of climate change from a scientific perspective, someone who can talk about what's happening on the coastal areas, what the impacts that are being faced and how it could be addressed, as well as those that can talk on increasing impacts because of heat waves, especially in an urban context, not just in terms of the duration, the frequency, but also the impacts. I'll stop here. Over to Rizvi. Oh, no. Okay.
I just wanted to say that, hello. Can you hear me at the back? So this is a very, awe-inspiring panel. And I would like to take this 1 minute to introduce the people on the panel who are the experts. We are not introducing Mr. Narasimhan because I don't have a page on you. But he is an experienced professional from the international organizations. So we have Dr. Krishnan Raghavan, who is the head of IIT-M. And if you read his CV, it will embarrass you that abhi tak hum aur aap kar kya rahe the apni life mein. So it's really long, so I'm not going to read all of it. But Dr. Raghavan has started his career basically at the Physical Research Laboratory in Ahmedabad. Then he went all the way to the institution called NCMRWF under IMD. Why it has that tongue twister of a name, we don't know. But all through his career, he's finally then eventually moved to IIT-M in 1995 and then stayed there for several years till then. So thank you to come and join us, sir. And then we have Madam Annie George, who's been working in this field for about 3 decades. And she did a lot of work starting with, a lot of field work starting with the tsunami, and runs the NGO called Coordination and Resource Center. And she has worked a lot, especially in recent times. She has been working a fair bit on the Wayanad issue. And we really appreciate her work within NDMA. Dr. Vatsa has told us a lot about you. Dr. Amir, who works at IIHS, the Indian Institute of Humanitarian Settlements, which is at Bangalore. It's more than about a decade old, but he's been working there most likely since inception. He is an engineer from Roorkee, a PhD in management from IIM Ahmedabad, which I think is a great institution because I also managed to study there. He's an expert on climate and energy policy, researcher, practitioner. The words that he has helped us use in our CV are very short, but they tell you a lot. So I'm sure we will learn a lot from your experience. And if Dr. Vatsa has been reaching out to you for loss and damage, then you must be a really knowledgeable man. When Dr. Vatsa speaks, we are all tongue-tied. Inside the NDMA, he's the last word. So then we have Abhiyan Tiwari, who looks young but is really deep. And the amount of stuff he knows about, earlier I thought this guy only knows about heat waves, but slowly I'm discovering he knows about lots of other disaster-related matters. He is one of our leading experts who has studied at Harvard University. He heads climate resilience and health at NRDC India. And he's worked with WHO, works with WMO. So we have a lot of expertise here. So this is a very highly experienced panel here. And except for myself, the other 6 are really deep level people. So I think I will request Dr. Vatsa to take this discussion to some really different degree.
So first to you, Dr. Krishnan, and can you just speak a little bit about the climate variability and change that is happening, the kind of the patterns of hazards that it is generating? Maybe you can speak a little bit about the pattern of the rainfall, extremely heavy rainfall that we are seeing, and the kind of impact it is happening, it is creating on creating the landslides and related disasters, the coastal hazards. So these are some of our current concerns that we are occupied with. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, NDMA. First of all, congratulations for the 20th Foundation Day of NDMA. It's doing a great job. Sir, I think the panel has really set the stage about climate change, the impacts it is making, the temperature increase, sea level rise, and you mentioned all of them. So in terms of one of the things that we are seeing in terms of the slow onset weather events, which is talking about due to the temperature increase. 2023 already, I think the temperature was 1.4 degrees above the pre-industrial. I think in the next few years, we will cross the very likely that we'll cross the 1.5 degree warming. So what it means in the terms of the temperature increase is the water vapor increase in the atmosphere, more water holding capacity, and that can fuel a lot of these heavy rainfall events. That is also increases almost 7% per degree warming, very similar to the extreme heat. So this is also at the same rate it is going to increase, heavy precipitation events. But one of the challenges when we talk about the regional scale extreme events, they are also linked to circulation changes. And recently this year we saw the monsoon. We had a lot of extreme rainfall events all across the country. Gujarat, for instance, a number of monsoon depressions, low pressure systems, they were producing a lot of rainfall. Also, we saw that in Visakhapatnam and Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. So these monsoon low pressure systems are going to intensify and they're going to get stronger. So in terms of and also the duration is getting longer. And so that leads to more flooding. So the monsoons, low pressure systems, that's something which we need to watch. We have made tremendous progress in terms of the tropical cyclones, but the heavy rainfall events, I think that still we need to strengthen our early warning system. So that is one area I would put top priority. And many of the systems, because they're also dependent on the circulation changes, large scale circulation. And this Indian Ocean dipole, there is a phenomenon called just like so they are becoming more frequent, and when that happens, around Gujarat and western coastal Maharashtra, this heavy rainfall. We have seen that. Like 2019 was a very strong case. So the variability is increasing. These are becoming more frequent. So that is one we have. So once we know that it is an IOD year, a positive IOD year, we can start preparing. That's the kind of sign for getting prepared. And we know these are the potential areas where rainfall is going to increase. And likewise, when you look at some of the heavy rainfall, maybe in Pakistan, the Indus flood that happened in 2022, they are all linked to the La Nina events. It happened in 2010. So the entire pattern is getting shifted westward. And that is a typical signature of a La Nina type of situation, which now studies are telling under globally warming condition, the La Nina situations are going to become more common. So we have to really look at the large scale changes in the large scales, how the changes in both in the atmosphere and ocean, and how they are affecting the circulation changes and their impact on the heavy rainfall. That is number one point. With regard to the coast, the sea level rise is increasing at a tremendous. That's also one of the slow onset events. And in the last 30 years, the global mean sea level rise is about 100 millimeters. And it's accelerating. And much of it is caused because of about 44% by melting of ice sheets and glaciers and 42% by thermal expansion. And so if the mean sea level rise, we have also looked at the high resolution, high frequency coastal tide gauge data from over the Indian coast. So the extreme sea levels are increasing. So whenever there's a storm surge or a tropical cyclone, the storm surges are extreme sea levels are increasing, and that is linked because of the increase in the mean sea level rise. Once the mean sea level has risen, extreme values in the sea level can rise, and that is a problem for the coastal areas. So we need to definitely keep monitoring them, keep assessing them, and strengthen our early warning system. That is one thing, and also increase the awareness. So a lot of, in addition to the operations that is going on, we need to invest on research and strengthen because the next generation, we have to make them stronger. So that is also going to be very important. So one is an operational strategy, which we have to do. The other thing, which IMD and many organizations are doing, strengthen the research capabilities, because this is going to be there for the coming several decades. That is one way of spreading awareness, and this is.
I have another quick question for you. Since you are also working on urban heat islands impact, what are the definitive conclusions on the incidence of the urban heat island effects in India? Do we see an increase in urban? Is there anything like urban heat island impact?
Yeah.
Or has there been an increase, and has there been an increase in the urban heat island effects? And do we see any change in the rainfall pattern or the heat wave impacts or any other thing that the cities are experiencing on account of UHIs?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Actually, some studies are suggesting that due to urbanization, these extreme heat waves are happening. And we also feel it. We sense it when we come to a city like Delhi, and from people's experience and from what they say. So urbanization is making a big impact, which is probably true. But scientifically, we have not been able to very convincingly demonstrate. For example, like we know that global warming, the warming that is happening everywhere is because of the carbon dioxide. And the aerosols are trying to cool. So these conclusions are based on more robust assessments. Whereas the advance in science, to what extent we are able to tell it with confidence that urbanization is indeed, this is what its role is, that is still we need to do a lot of work. So the confidence in that is probably, I'll put medium or even low level confidence, but probably in the coming years it will be done. And likewise, the effect of urbanization on the extreme rainfall, quite a few studies have suggested. But how do you differentiate between the rainfall over urban and a rural area? Why should a heavy rainfall be restricted only to urban? It can happen only even around a neighboring place. So these are very complex questions. I think much more work is needed. And also a lot of water bodies are getting affected. big lakes, for example. I remember Bangalore used to have big lakes. Now that is gone. So the question is, what is the impact of these big lakes on the regional climate? Even those questions, I think, coming to definitive answers, we need much more work, scientific work. This is my personal assessment.
Thank you. Thank you. We will have some more questions. Thank you. Annie George, you have been working with communities for a long, long time. Now there are two major hazards emerging and occupying our attention. One, of course, is the landslides. You know, our Western Ghats is very much disturbed by continuous rise in landslides. And though landslides is a rapid onset disaster, it's not really a rapid onset disaster. Landslides happen in slow motion, they eat away the communities very slowly, and people don't always recognize that. And the second, of course, is equally slow onset is the coastal erosion. And we have been working on both the issues. So can you speak a little bit about how the communities are affected, how the communities cope with them, and how communities respond to them, and what need to be done to improve communities' resilience to these hazards. So, based on your experience, you can help. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, though we call drought and all that as slow onset disasters, there is another aspect I would like to add to this, which is a creeping disaster. Slow, just like what sir was saying in the beginning, that drought has become a fast onset disaster. But on the other hand, creeping disasters, which is much more insidious. For instance, sir was talking about sea level rise. And what does it do to the water body? But what does it do to the drinking water problems that is happening over there, which is an issue we are not looking at? What is it doing to the increasing salination of the land? What is it doing to the increasing salination of the water tables? These are aspects which, because of its diffused impacts, we are not taking it as a disaster. Because we are hardwired to look at disaster as an event, a catastrophic event, which has a beginning and an end. But we are not hardwired, we are not even sensitive to this slow, insidious movement of these kinds of disasters. So I was just asking whether are the parameters that are being taken up under climate change shared with DRR? Because DRR, so we are also bound by that management cycle, which speaks about disaster, just before the disaster, just after the disaster. Our management cycle is not at all designed towards meeting this. So we as NGOs, we are again bound by the cycle. We are bound by the activities that come into that cycle. Sir, our own definition of disaster in NDMA is not opening us up to identifying the parameters of this. For instance, even things like drought, when you're talking about, there's a pre-drought condition which is affecting us communities. We don't have water to drink. Our children, I would have shown you photographs, but unfortunately there are no PPTs. There's a school which is close to a water tank, and when the water tanker comes, the school is shut for 1 hour. Everybody comes out because the teacher herself has to fill water. So there's a loss of education days. Girls, as we know, are getting married earlier. So the women have to go long. And because of privatization of water supplies, the community water supplies are getting decreased, which means that the voiceless actually have to travel further and suffer much more during such things. So our parameters, our indicators, maybe we should look at indicators which look at disaster risk rather than a disaster impact. The problem is that even Oxfam and all of them have done a disaster risk or indicator thing of famine, but they've come up also with deaths as a final indicator. But by then things have gone too far.
It's morbidity.
Yes, so that is what I would
thank
like to
you. Thank you. Dr. Bajaj, loss and damage is a new area for us.
and we have not been able to develop a methodology yet for assessing loss and damage. How do you see the slow onset disasters being addressed through this loss and damage framework so that we are able to understand both the economic and non-economic costs and visible and non-visible impacts? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krishna. And first of all, thank you for inviting me here, and many congratulations to the NDMA on the Formation Day. I think this is a remarkable institution which has contributed remarkably to India's development and ensured that our growth doesn't erode, and everyone is a participant in this growth journey. And thank you for this question. I think just to make sure that everyone understands, I'll not make it very technical, but I'll touch upon 3 or 4 issues that I feel are at the foundation of this loss and damage debate. The first thing is, just borrowing from Dr. Krishnan, that I think we need a lot more evidence, and very, very calibrated evidence, to be able to understand what is happening. And I think Annie also mentioned, talked a little bit about the same thing. And one of the things that I feel very pained about is that there are multiple institutions and we are not efficiently and effectively coordinating and collaborating. Even in terms of data protocols, there are different ways in which impact is assessed, different ways in which outcomes are assessed. The methodologies are like black boxes. There's no open forum which kind of brings all these methodologies for public scrutiny, not with the intention that someone is going to criticize or belittle scientific work, but to advance. So that is something that we need a lot more evidence on. I think what is the cause-effect relationship, what is causing what, making sensational comments or sensationalizing a certain outcome is a short-term event-based thing. It doesn't serve anyone's purpose. That's the first point. The second point is that if we look at the loss and damage story and we also correlate it with slow onset story, and you look carefully at this particular issue, you'll find that it is either linked to food production, agriculture, or it is linked to livelihoods. So it's a poverty, it's an overarching poverty story. Right? And the problem is that, as Annie also said, that there are so many creeping disasters that even if we kind of accept the fact that certain ecosystems will kind of become defunct, or they'll not be, you'll not be able to maintain those, the transition is equally difficult to manage because there's no surplus you are generating. These are all linked to small value-add production systems, so there's nothing significant that you are generating. So all the more important that we secure these systems and ensure that the assessments that we make, what Dr. Krishna was also talking about, are so robust that we are able to demonstrate that, look, we are impacted and a lot of things are impacted, and therefore we are able to demonstrate very clearly that, look, this is what is required. The third point is which is also partly answering Dr. Krishna's question, that we are heading into an era where nature-based interventions are becoming or will become very important, particularly in cities. And as we look, for example, if there are a lot of trade-offs with these nature-based interventions, like, okay, sparing some land and not building, ensuring that certain grasslands are maintained. So there are some costs and benefits attributed to it. And these are very difficult, unresolved questions which will require a lot of scientific assessment. And these are also avenues which will probably qualify to be able to be a part of the loss of moves around the world. So some of these things are a little unanswered at this moment, and we'll need some more investigation to be able to come to some kind of a conclusion. So very briefly.
Thank you, Dr. Amir. So just a quick counter question on that one. So it's fine to know that there is slow onset disaster, that there are many creeping slow onset disasters, and the issues that happen with various IOD and the Western disturbances and all of them coming together or not. But in government, we have systems, we have standardization. So when we start discussions on loss and damage, we are not talking of the international level where they are talking of the L&D fund. We are not talking of Government of India and the people who are aware as to what an L&D fund is. We are talking of our financial systems as they exist in government, from where the money will come. So when there is loss and damage, you just mentioned in your second last sentence that you have to be specific about how to assess that damage and who that money should go to. So there is a huge gap between the Government of India and any government systems as to how money will be given out to how it is assessed and made specific. So is there some value add you could add over there?
I don't know. I think even if we look at insurance market, and we have talked a lot about crop insurance, etc. There are a lot of complicated, like for example, were you able to intervene effectively to be able to save your crops? That's a classic market failure situation in insurance. I don't think, I don't have a ready answer for this. Much of it is flowing very informally. Sometimes you are able to access livelihood markets to be able to fill those gaps in terms of the loss of income or loss of property. But I don't think at least I haven't seen a very systematic existing framework on ground, unless and until if there is in rapid disaster cases, at least there is a mechanism. The district collector gets involved. There is an institutional system, but in slow onset, I don't think they exist. I don't know what I can. Maybe Dr. Krishnan has something to add, or Annie perhaps.
So this recently Professor Kerry Emanuel, okay, can you hear me? Yeah, he is a professor at MIT. He works on tropical cyclones, and he gave a beautiful talk. He was telling climate models, we know how to design experiments and see what is the effect of greenhouse gas on the warming and extreme events like tropical cyclones. But he was also proposing to include the risks due to tropical cyclone that should be built in within the climate models. Not only calculate how the tropical cyclone is going to change, how it's also going to impact economically, what are the risks. So it was a very nice talk. So probably we should think, and that may be one way to get started. So because much of the progress in climate science has come out of this, and eventually other things came. Probably there is a message.
In development terms, there was an article yesterday or day before yesterday. It is India versus the East now. The East is lagging so much behind, and if India has to really develop, then East has to come up.
The one reason why the East is not coming up is the kind of persistence of the slow onset disasters. And it is, you can really see it at the household level, how the assets are getting slowly eroded, depleted, and it has the kind of impact on out-migration, fragmentation of households, women's health and well-being. So just little deeper look and you would see the kind of pauperization that is happening on account of disasters across a large number of millions and millions of households. And you see that, in Bihar's per capita income is 1/3 of India. That's perhaps says something about how the slow onset disasters are affecting the state. Before I move to Avianji, I just wanted to, I saw Mr. Colonel Srivastava, is lightning a slow onset disaster or a rapid onset disaster? No, I think the way lightning is built up, it is now a slow onset disaster. The way lightning is increasing, it's not really, though lightning is considered to be the ultimate thing about speed. So
Thank you very much for this question, sir. In fact, you resonated what I always advocate, because lightning is not an instant disaster. It is the prolonged heat wave, the prolonged moisture carrying capacity, which is increasing slowly due to the global warming. It's the slow onset, prolonged onset, which comes when it is, full up to the brim as a lightning flash. But it is definitely a slow onset of disaster. It is a complete spectrum of climate, sir, if you really go into it. And each and every aspect contributes to its final occurrence, sir.
So thank you. That's how the disasters need to be looked at. I think you wanted to say something?
Yeah. So the hazard may be slow onset, but the disaster is instantaneous.
Avianji, now, do you need more evidence of heat wave to work on the heat wave, or do we have enough evidence? And how do you see the heat action plans coming up in the next 5 years? And how do you think they could be more inclusive and more focused on social equity? Thank you.
Sure. Thank you so much, sir. So first of all, let me resonate to my co-panelists and must congratulate NDMA on their 20th Foundation Day. Definitely, I personally also have been engaging with NDMA for almost 8 to 9 years now, and I have seen how progressive, we often compare, because I also get opportunity to interact with, the counterparts in the other countries. We know how much progressive NDMA and serious NDMA is about dealing with disasters. How beautifully NDMA with its own institutional tools, with the acts, with the policies, which were the backbone of dealing COVID. We wouldn't have been able to deal with it if we haven't had the DM Act, that and the national policy and plan. So again, big congratulations. What Dr. Annie was talking about, disasters are not just events, they are consequences, right? Hazard is an event, but the disasters are consequences after that hazardous event. And on that crippling effect of those consequences, heat or the slow onset disasters on the other side, how many of you have heard about the boiling frog syndrome? Boiling frog syndrome? कितने लोगों ने सुना है? So क्या होता है ना, अगर if there is a boiling water in a pan, very hot boiling water, and you put a frog into that pan, it will immediately jump out, right? But if you put a frog in a tepid water and let that boil over a period, the frog will not realize that it is.
Let's not go into that. No, sir. It's very,
Sir.
very harsh.
So, yeah. So on heat, that is the thing, sir. The perception is something that has over a period changed. At least people are now accepting it that it is an issue. It is a big issue. Heat action plans have evolved a lot in India. Luckily, we have now been able to get heat not notified as a national disaster, but it is getting notified by more and more states. Recently, Madhya Pradesh also notified it, and there are a couple of states who are in stage of notifying it as a state-specific disaster. Also, the good part is that heat and lightning, they both became now part of the national and state mitigation fund. In future, what we see is that heat action plans need to be decentralized. The state and national and state levels, agencies can provide the guidelines. But it is the local agencies, the local, the ULBs, the district authorities that have to develop their local heat action plan in consultation with the communities, with all the stakeholders. What our experience has been in whatever successful heat action plans that we have seen in the country. For example, Ahmedabad, for example, Jodhpur, what Ms. Bijalben was talking about. So wherever the consultation is done with community, Jodhpur, for example, is a bottom-up heat action plan, example of a bottom-up heat action plan, where the community first, initiated the actions and then, went to the local municipal government, and then they showed interest and asked for a comprehensive, larger heat action plan with vulnerability assessment, with local, threshold, with, what resources need to be deployed at what places. And then they are ready to invest into it. So it has to be a consultative and all of the society exercise instead of doing in silo and making it another document which always lies there in the shell.
Thank you. Thank you. So now, since we are short of time, I will not have another round of questions, and I will request my co-chair, Ramraj, to just conclude the discussion.
It's been a very insightful discussion, and we're really privileged to have had the opportunity to listen to such esteemed panelists. We had Dr. Krishnan talking about what happens in the atmosphere and the linkage between many of the factors that can give us some kind of an early warning in terms of, for instance, you mentioned about the Indian Ocean dipole, how understanding that there is a positive dipole could give us some lead time to anticipate. It's not exactly an actionable early warning on site, but then you do understand at a regional scale that there is going to be likely impact in, for instance, the western parts of India. You also touched upon the accelerating sea level rise and the impacts that it creates, not just on the mean sea level, but also the extreme sea levels, because of which during cyclonic storms, the storm surge is creating more havoc. On coastal erosion and other issues that Dr. Annie George mentioned, you introduced a very, it's actually quite disturbing. You mentioned an insidious kind of an impact. I think you meant to be provocative. It's not something that we actually see, but then it is within our system. And that is the unique, distinguishing factor of slow onset, that you really, actually we have it, all the ingredients that create the impact, and we are seeing it day by day. It's just creeping in on us. Still, there is so much more that could be done. You talked about the need for having disaster risk management indicators. Try to look at how agencies are not getting siloed or compartmentalized because of our definitions of pre-disaster, post-disaster, early warning, response, and so on, which work admirably for rapid onset, but not so much for slow onset. So there is it's a continuum. The slow onset disasters, events as we speak, they are a continuum, and it is always an approach that we have to take, which is slightly nuanced compared to rapid onset. And Dr. Bajaj, you talked about three important things as we look at loss and damage. One, the evidence to understand what is happening. We also talked about the assessments being more nuanced and to be able to demarcate clearly the impact so that actions can be predicated accordingly. You also talked about, increasing emphasis on nature-based interventions or nature-based solutions, how that could, and the need, the lack of science to be able to quantify the potential benefits so that when the loss and damage fund is actually operationalized, there is a way forward. We had an interesting side discussion around lightning and the slow onset versus the rapid onset of lightning. We discussed about it being a hazard which is building up over time because of what Dr. Krishnan mentioned in terms of climate change, but also as a disaster, it is quite rapid and creates a lot of impacts. Towards the end, we heard from Mr. Abhiyan Tiwari about the increasing emphasis on work in India on heat waves and tackling heat waves through action plans at various levels, community level, city level, state level, but also an interesting approach that we should not take it as a very siloed or a very standalone approach to addressing heat waves, but link it more with other aspects of development. I think it has been a really insightful discussion held by Dr. Krishnaji and put together by Mr. Rizvi Saab.
So since you were rounding up, I'll do the rounding up of the rounding up. So the lesson for us in government is that the point that was mentioned here about coordination. So the big thing is coordination. In our opening remarks, HOD had mentioned there are 68 organizations that handle disaster management. I've been around here for about 1.5 years and I'm still learning the names of most of them and trying to pronounce NCMRWF properly. So that is the thing that the government can do, is coordination on every subject, number one. Number two, learning for us in government is this point about specificity. So whenever you go to the finance people that this is money that has to be spent over here, then the finance people ask you specific questions which are there as per their procedure, and they're definitely not wrong. They're right. There is a good set of, and we have a lot of money which the Home Secretary was talking about in the morning. So how to bring all the theory into specificity and to make it intelligible for the finance people to understand, and essentially smoothing the flow of financial expenditures. And the third big point which I got from Dr. Annie is the point about say it in your legislation, that if this is a slow onset disaster, define it somewhere. Talk about it somewhere. The phrase loss and damage, the term, it came in and it's now an accepted term because the world's talking about it, but it's not yet properly defined and understood in the system. So we have to start bringing in this term also of slow onset disasters so that our paperwork and everything starts understanding this term. Like the word mitigation. 5 years ago, nobody knew what the word mitigation. So now when the Finance Commission with inputs from a lot of experts here, including Dr. Vatsa, who was possibly the Finance Commission, as some people say, is a word that everybody understands, everybody talks about, it is understood. So this is our target for the next 1 year or 2 years, that this is how I think we will take up the lessons learned from this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you to all the speakers, all the panelists. Great contribution. So great appreciation. Thank you very much. Thank you.
सफ़ी साहब आपसे अनुरोध करेंगे सभी पैनलिस्ट का आभार व्यक्त करते हुए स्मृति चिन्ह भेंट करने के लिए.
So एक आभार और व्यक्त करना है अपार्ट फ्रॉम द पैनलिस्ट. मैडम रीता वर्मा जो दूरदर्शन की बहुत ही बड़ी स्टार हैं, वो हम लोग के साथ दिन भर रहीं. उनके लिए थैंक यू और उनके लिए तारीफ. और अब से आपको हम लोग डॉक्टर रीता वर्मा भी कहने लगेंगे.
सभी पैनलिस्ट का एक ग्रुप फोटोग्राफ। और हम आप सभी को सूचित करते हैं कि हमारे बीच आज के आयोजन के समापन सत्र के विशेष अतिथि श्री के.एम. सिंह जी मौजूद हैं। जोरदार तालियों के साथ स्वागत किया जाए। के.एम. सिंह साहब सेवानिवृत्त आईपीएस अधिकारी और पूर्व महानिदेशक सीआईएसएफ। आप 2005 से 2014 तक एनडीएमए के सदस्य रहे हैं। आपने राष्ट्रीय आपदा प्रतिक्रिया बल की नींव रखी, देश के लिए 3 स्तरीय आपदा प्रतिक्रिया तंत्र की कल्पना की और मदद की राज्य आपदा प्रतिक्रिया बलों को बढ़ाने में। आपने आपदा प्रबंधन के सभी चरणों में नागरिक सुरक्षा की सक्रिय भागीदारी का विचार भी प्रतिपादित किया है। श्री के.एम. सिंह को 2020 सुभाष चंद्र बोस आपदा प्रबंधन पुरस्कार से सम्मानित किया गया है। हम अनुग्रहित हैं आपकी उपस्थिति से सर। स्वागत आपका। और कार्यक्रम को आगे बढ़ाते हुए हम आमंत्रित करेंगे एनडीएमए की निदेशक सुश्री मृणालिनी श्रीवास्तव जी को 20वें स्थापना दिवस के आयोजन के अभी तक के कार्यक्रम को संक्षेप में गणमान्य अतिथियों के समक्ष रखने के लिए। मृणालिनी।
Honorable Chief Guest for the valedictory session on the occasion of the 20th Formation Day of NDMA, members, esteemed speakers, DRR experts, a very good afternoon. Under the theme Empowering Communities for Disaster Risk Reduction through Awareness for Behavioral Change, we held 3 technical sessions. Sir, the first technical session focused on voices from the communities coping with shift in weather pattern. It included heat wave, droughts, and urban floods. The session had eminent speakers as panelists who had served the communities in dealing with this critical issue of coping with shifting weather. Some thoughts that resulted from the decision included community-centric approach, leveraging the grassroots level learnings, bridging traditional practices with new technologies, changes in disaster patterns owing to shift in weather, especially increase in weather temperature in colder areas like Ladakh and rainfall in deserts. These were flagrant examples, sir, which needed immediate attention and adaptation measures. The second technical session was on disaster risk reduction, technology for last mile communication, where we had a mix of panelists, which included subject matter experts, implementation partners, and community recipients of the information. The interaction divulged that while there is an urgent need of smart devices and applications be made available to people in the community, the audit and credibility of the application would also merit attention for uniformity. The session voiced the examples from NHPC on water level information. The community representatives urged a deeper integration and prudent combination of technology and beneficiaries. Sir, before I brief you on the valedictory session, which of course coincided with the third technical session, I would like to inform you that we had an inaugural session chaired by the Union Home Secretary, where 6 guidebooks were launched and one important community scheme by the name Yuva Abda Mitra scheme was launched. So you had witnessed the valedictory technical session yourself. Nonetheless, I would sum it up for the recollection. The third session concentrated on slow onset weather events, awareness on climate change and DRR. The resultant discussions highlighted on changing dynamics of hazards with climate change, systematically impacting the etymology of different hazards, their impact on governance structures, economies, and households. The speakers also indicated that hotspots, large-scale atmospheric and oceanic changes, water bodies, urbanization, and the like would shape the slow onset weather phenomena and ancillary diffused impacts. Evidence-based referencing and nature-based solutions were also discussed, especially in the context of loss and damages. Sir, all the sessions reflected gender balance in their panel composition. We are elated that we have had DRR experts with inclusive voice. A call for substantive workshops emanated from today's technical session, and this we consider as a progressive and significant takeaway. We look forward to integrated, inclusive, and technology-embedded disaster risk reduction mechanism for a disaster-resilient India. Thank you.
राष्ट्रीय आपदा प्रबंधन प्राधिकरण की स्थापना 2005 में हुई थी। 20वें स्थापना दिवस पर एनडीएमए एक कॉफी टेबल बुक आपके सामने ला रहा है। राष्ट्रीय आपदा प्रबंधन प्राधिकरण की एक कॉफी टेबल बुक 2005 में राष्ट्रीय आपदा प्रबंधन प्राधिकरण के स्थापना से लेकर अब तक के सफर को दर्शाती है। साथ ही ये पिछले एक दशक में यानी 2014 से 2024 में आए बदलाव को भी दिखाती है, जिस दौरान देश में आपदा प्रबंधन में एक प्रतिमान विस्थापन देखने को मिलता है, जिसमें हम प्रतिक्रियावादी से पूर्व सक्रियता की दिशा में आगे बढ़े हैं। आज के आयोजन के विशेष अतिथि श्री के.एम. सिंह जी से हम एनडीएमए की कॉफी टेबल बुक के ई लॉन्च का विनम्र अनुरोध करते हैं। जोरदार तालियों के साथ एक बार एनडीएमए के इस पूरे सफर को संजोए किया जा रहा है और ये बताएगा कि किस तरह से 2005 से लेकर 2024 तक का सफर एनडीएमए ने तय किया और इस सफर को तय करने में देश में सोच को मजबूत किया। इस सोच के साथ भारत में आपदा प्रबंधन पर सिर्फ संस्थाएं नहीं बल्कि जन भागीदारी भी मजबूत हुई है। हम आमंत्रित करेंगे इस आयोजन के विशेष अतिथि श्री के.एम. सिंह जी को एनडीएमए के 20वें स्थापना दिवस के आयोजन के समापन भाषण के लिए। सर।
Good afternoon to all of you. Member NDMA, Sri Rajendra Singh ji, Lieutenant General Ata Hasnain, Dr. Krishna Vats, Advisor Safir Rijvi, representatives from various ministries and departments of Government of India, representatives from states and union territories. As the founder member of NDMA, it's a proud privilege for me today to be here on this momentous occasion. I would like to congratulate NDMA on completion of 20 years. I would also like to express my gratitude to NDMA for inviting me over here. And let me tell you, I feel humbled to be here delivering the valedictory address. I must compliment NDMA for choosing a very apt topic for today's discussion, empowering communities for DRR through awareness and behavioral changes. The use of the word empowering here brings me back to 2005 when we joined as member in the NDMA, the initial days. After NDMA was constituted, the then Vice Chairman, General NCBs and all the members called on the then President, late Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. General Viz gave me a presentation on role, responsibilities, charter and duties of NDMA as per the DM Act. After giving a very patient hearing, Dr. Kalam said one very significant thing, and I would say prophetic thing. He said, Jalviz, let me assure you, you have been given a very onerous responsibility in the Act, but you will be able to succeed, or NDMA will be able to succeed only if it is empowered. He used the word, and as you all know, Dr. Kalam was an intellectual. He used the word empowered at that time. I am happy that 20 years from now, then, in today's theme also, the same word empowered has been used. It's very important. Any organization, any entity, any department, any individual, if he is given some responsibility, unless the organization, the entity is empowered, it cannot succeed. So it's a very good theme that you have chosen. I must compliment you that. I would like to enlarge the scope of this community to include all stakeholders. I am sure you mean all stakeholders. Then I would like to say that NDMA over the years has done commendable work in many fields. But one area in which, according to me, NDMA has excelled is on mitigation in cyclone risk mitigation. And if you trace the history of cyclone back as far as India is concerned, the most devastating cyclone that India witnessed was way back in November 1839, 165 years ago, 1839, in Odisha, where casualty was incredible, 3 lakhs casualty in 1839. And things didn't change thereafter until 1999, when Odisha super cyclone happened. That was the wake-up call. And after that, the Gujarat earthquake and tsunami brought about a complete change, leading to enactment of Disaster Management Act and constitution of NDMA. And thereafter, the NDMA, in association with MHA, has done commendable work in field of disaster risk mitigation. They conceived the NCRMP, National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project. And after the NCRMP came into being, and I don't want to go into detail of key elements of NCRMP, it's very comprehensive, but capacity building, awareness generation, last mile connectivity, all are very much there. as the key components of NCRP. And after that, the first major cyclone was Cyclone Phylline in 2013 in Odisha. The entire world was anticipating casualty in terms of a few thousands, but significantly, there was only 21 casualties. It became a subject matter of a study to many researchers. How has India achieved it? And I would like to mention that I was there in the NDMA at that time. In this cyclone Phylline, 11.5 lakh people were evacuated from the coastal region to the cyclone shelter. Nobody, not a single soul was left in the near the sea coast. As a result, casualty was very little. And thereafter, in this field, India never looked backward. Whether later on, next year was Cyclone Hudhud in 2014 or Cyclone Fani in 2019, casualty was only in double figure. But the shining example of handling of disaster or preparedness by the community was in the cyclone Biparjoy last year in Gujarat. It was a case of zero casualty, not a single casualty. And even the Prime Minister appreciated the courage, the preparedness, and the spirit of resilience of the community in dealing with Cyclone Biparjoy. But then, handling of these cyclone disasters should not give us any sense of complacency. India is a vast country with prone to multiple disasters, and the entire country, including hinterland, has to prepare itself, prepare the community, prepare all the stakeholders in dealing with all the disasters. And if we talk in that terms, well, community and stakeholders are many. And it's a very challenging, Herculean task. But one area I feel is very important is the capacity building, awareness generation of school children. School children are in the impressionable age, and awareness generation of school children is a long-term investment in the field of DRR, and that should require high priority. And I will give you an example. When tsunami happened in 1999, 25th of December, a British couple was holidaying in Phuket resort in Thailand. The couple had a 10-year-old daughter by name Tilly Smith. Tilly Smith was taught about this tsunami only 2 weeks ago in her geography class. And she was also told what are the signs of tsunami. Frothy waves, surging sea, these are the signs. And on 25th December 1999, when this couple with a 10-year-old daughter was on the Phuket beach, Tilly Smith, the 10-year-old girl, saw the same thing, frothy waves and surging sea. She started shouting, "Tsunami, tsunami, run away, you'll be killed." Initially, people didn't take her seriously, but then they realized the seriousness and people ran away. And this girl saved the life of more than 100 people. That is the strength of the capacity building of or awareness generation of young children. But the point is that is only one component. It's a much bigger area, and we have to talk about, in your discussions, building community resilience. And then once again, building community resilience is also a major area. But again, my perception is that we should approach both top-down and bottom-up approach. And I think bottom-up approach is very important. And when you think of bottom-up approach for community resilience, I think Gram Panchayat play a very important role. And when you're talking of empowering in today's conference, empowering gram panchayats in their preparedness to deal with disaster can give a huge dividend. But the point is, gram panchayat not only has to be empowered, but they have to be all integrated and involved in the disaster risk, DRR framework of the country. And I'll give you another example here. I spent about 3-4 months in a year in Goa, and I have found that gram panchayats in Goa are very powerful at the grassroots level in the administrative framework of the state. Nothing can move without the approval of gram panchayat, very powerful. And I want to cite an example. 4 years ago, in South Goa, 100 acres of government land was sanctioned, approved, for construction of an IIT in South Goa. Any other state would welcome. It was in a government land. But then, when the survey started, not only local panchayat, but the neighboring panchayat also, they all stated dharna in hundreds and thousands of people. Dharna went on for 3 months, and they said that we do not want this IIT, because if you make this IIT, thousands of trees will be cut, and we won't allow a single tree to be cut. And ultimately, after 3 months, government had to relent. That is the spirit of resilience of community led by Gram Panchayat in Goa. On the contrary, if you look at this, where in Goa, the people or the Gram Panchayat do not allow a single tree to be cut. In many of the hilly states in northern region, there is a indiscriminate felling of trees and deforestation leading to serious disasters. But nobody objects. At least the people, Gram Panchayat, they don't object because it creates employment. Well, employment is important. And these, whatever is happening in the name of development. No doubt, development is very important. But there has to be a judicious balance between development and disaster management. That is very important. So we are talking of community empowerment. I would like to mention that the role of community or community in the disaster management has been adequately covered in various institutional framework of the Government of India, be it Disaster Management Act 2005, National Policy or National DM Plan, everywhere it is very, very well covered. And of course, no doubt NDMA is doing a lot of work in this field, but as I mentioned, it's a Herculean task. And in this community capacity building or empowerment, what important initiative that NDMA has taken, which I am quite impressed, is their Apada Mitra scheme. I think it was started in 2016, and I am told that there are already more than 1 lakh volunteers in Apada Mitra. And now I believe, as I was told here also, that this Apada Mitra scheme is being enlarged to include most of the youth organizations like NCC, NYKS, NSS, and Bharat Scout. It's a very good initiative. And if this pool of youth organizations, they can be garnered together and motivated, integrated in the disaster management framework, I'm sure it will make a big difference in the DRR framework of the country. So these are some of the things. I believe there were 3 very important sessions, technical sessions, and I don't want to name them, but I think a lot of valuable inputs have come from these sessions, and they will go a long way in providing enough material for NDMA to proceed further with a vision that has been given to NDMA as per the Act, as per the policy, as per the plan. So with these words, I would like to conclude, but I would like to mention in the end that DRR or disaster management cannot be done only by the government. Active participation of all the stakeholders, community, individuals, Gram Panchayat is very important. And that has to be given a due priority. Then only, but I must say that in the last 2 decades, lots of progress has been made. And at this pace, I am sure NDMA has already acquired a pride of place as a disaster management authority globally. And I'm sure they will do much better. With all this, I wish the best of luck to the NDMA in their vision initiative to achieve or accomplish whatever has been assigned to them in the policy, act and guidelines. And I would also like to wish all of you a happy Diwali. Thank you.
धन्यवाद सर, आपके मार्गदर्शन में एनडीएमए ने कई सफलताएं हासिल की हैं। और आज के आयोजन के समापन की ओर बढ़ते हुए अब हम आमंत्रित करेंगे सदस्य एनडीएमए श्री सैयद हसनैन साहब को धन्यवाद प्रस्ताव के लिए।
Good afternoon and Jai Hind. 20 years gone by, lots of achievements for the NDMA, so very well listed out by our guest of honor. So the dignitaries on the dais, that's Shri K.M. Singh Ji, former member NDMA and the recipient of the Subhash Chandra Bose Abda Prabandhan Puraskar. Members of the NDMA, all senior officers and other colleagues from NDMA, representatives from the ministries, states and union territories, distinguished guests, senior government officers, friends from the media, and ladies and gentlemen. I thank you all for sparing your valuable time for this program, the 20th anniversary celebration of the NDMA. I also extend my special thanks to Shri Govind Mohanji, our Union Home Secretary, who was gracious enough to make himself available for this program and gave a stirring review of what the NDMA has achieved over the last 20 years. I wish to express my profound gratitude to our guest of honor, Shri K.M. Singh Ji, former member NDMA for 2 terms, that's a 2-term member, for attending our program and sharing these enlightening thoughts with all of us. As the first recipient of the Subhash Chandra Bose Abda Prabandhan Puraskar by the Honorable Prime Minister in 2020 for his contribution in the field of disaster management, particularly the raising of the NDRF, it was our honor to hear you, sir, and have you among us. I thank the session chairs. I thought we had some wonderful sessions, the 3 of them, technical sessions, the panelists, the speakers, voices from the communities, rapporteurs of the technical sessions of today's program, empowering communities for disaster risk reduction through awareness for behavioral change, to draw valuable insights related to the theme, preparation of proceedings, and also proposing inputs on the subject. I also thank all the technical experts and the subject matter specialists who were engaged in preparation and finalization of the technical documents. Many of them, you saw 6 of them which were released today. Their contribution is indeed very praiseworthy. Our gratitude to the staff of Sushma Swaraj Bhavan for hosting this event, organizing it, and providing us some very high quality catering services. I also thank the event manager for organizing all the logistics and technical support required for the event. Our profuse thanks to the media representatives for covering the entire program today. Last but not the least, I thank all NDMA officers and staff who took painstaking efforts for successfully organizing the 20th Formation Day program. Lots of effort has gone into it, there's no doubt. And I would finally like to compliment Ms. Mrinalini Srivastav by name for her contribution, which was singular, absolutely. She led from the front like a true warrior. Those who have known her, who have been working with her, know that she's got all the warrior qualities. Thank you very much for being there and leading this show. Thank you once again and Jai Hind.
और एनडीएमए के 20वें स्थापना दिवस के आयोजन को सफल बनाने के लिए सभी उपस्थित अतिथियों, साथियों और देश के हर हिस्से से पहुंचे प्रतिनिधियों का बहुत आभार और धन्यवाद। 20वां स्थापना दिवस के आयोजन का समापन है, लेकिन एनडीएमए का सफर जारी रहेगा उसी ऊर्जा के साथ, उसी सक्रियता के साथ। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सभी का। धन्यवाद।